I'm going to talk to you about Congo. More specifically, I'm going to talk to you about how I use oral and archival evidence to better understand the history of a religious movement known as Kitawala. Even more specifically, I'm going to talk to you about how the Belgian colonial government imprisoned members of this religious movement in internment camps from about 1930 to 1960. So often if people know anything about Congo at all, it's that King Leopold II was a real piece of work. The igniter of Billy Joel's infamous fire, whose personal reign over Congo is known as the era of red rubber because of the Congolese blood that was spilled in his endeavors to extract as much rubber and other resources from the colony as possible. But I'm not here to rehash the horrors of red rubber. Instead, I'm going to talk to you about a different kind of violence perpetrated by the Belgian colonial government, a policy that they called relegation. It's a policy that they developed largely to deal with what they called subversive movements, of which, as you can see, Kitawala was one. Kitawala is a fascinating movement. It has some roots in the African Watchtower movement, and Watchtower, if you're not familiar, is today better known as Jehovah's Witnessism. But, and I would argue that this is the more important point, as a movement, Kitawala was also profoundly shaped by, and indeed given meaning through, indigenous concepts of spirituality, health, and power. And indeed, most Kitawalas today talk about Kitawala as a religion of asili, or tradition. This powerful combination of Watchtower, with its infamous antipathy towards secular government, and indigenous ideas about how one might evoke and embody spiritual power in times of distress, rendered Kitawala a formidable force and a challenge to the Belgian colonial government. And indeed, they feared it, which is why they developed this policy of relegation. Now, at first, they thought that they could relegate Kitawala's preachers to different regions. If they were in cities, for example, they would send them to their village of origin, where they would be forced to submit to the customary powers and discipline. However, as you can see, this wasn't a great plan. Turns out that sending zealous Kitawalist leaders to the countryside just accelerated its spread. So by the 1930s, the Belgians began experimenting with internment camps. And it's in this context that the camp known as COLAGREL-Kasaji was built. And so part of what I'm trying to do in my research is to gain a better understanding of how Kitawalists experienced life in these camps, both what it might have meant for them at the time, but also what the memory of that history means for them today. And so this is why I traveled to COLAGREL in 2018. I'd already done a great deal of archival research on the camps, and I had maps, for example, like the one that you see here, showing not only the location of the barracks of the Kitawalas prisoners and their families, who were also forced to live in the camps, but the fields, where they were forced to cultivate cash crops, which they were then forced to sell in this cooperative so that they might learn to be productive, tax-paying capitalist subjects who appreciated the virtues and opportunities of incorporation into the colonial economy. All of this they did under constant surveillance from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week. The archives also offer some tantalizing glimpses into how Kitawalists themselves imagined and experienced life in the camp. I know, for example, that they resisted and that they were punished. And I have reports of prisoners sabotaging their crops. I know they organized work stoppages and rioted and continued to preach Kitawala in secret. And I know that they were imprisoned for their efforts. But I also have a report from one colonial official who was complaining about the camp's guard tower, which he thought looked too much like the tower in the Watchtower literature. He said the prisoners were retained their spirit of fanaticism and saw in the creation of the camp the material realization of their Kitawalas church and did not ever want to leave. So what the archives reveal then is that the camp was a place of violence and resistance. At the same time, they reveal that Kitawalas themselves imagined the camp as a place of transformation, even empowerment. And this dual image of relegation was very much affirmed in my oral research. But my oral work did more than affirm the things that I had found in the archives. It brought a visceral understanding of this space. It brought an understanding of the individual and community narratives and memories around COLAGREL. And for much of that understanding, I have folks like Pastor Theophile Malongo to thank. You can see him here in blue in front of the prisoners' barracks in which he was born in 1952. While his parents were prisoners in the camp. Today, Pastor Theophile leads the Kitawalas church in nearby Kasaji. And while I don't have time to tell you about all the ways in which he and other members of the Kitawalas community transformed my understanding of this space, let me give you just one example. And it concerns this beautiful grove of mangoes that you see here. You see, the Belgians thought that they were beautiful too. In fact, they were part of their plan to turn COLAGREL into a cité jardin, or a garden city, which was this kind of urban planning fad in Belgium at the time. No doubt they hoped that this kind of display of mastery over nature would convince these recalcitrant Kitawalas of the benefits of living under colonial rule. And this kind of developmentalist thinking was popular in colonial circles at the time. But if the archive reveals the developmentalist hopes of these colonial officials, oral history reveals the price of its implementation. One day we walked past these mango trees as we were making our way to the grave of Mama St. Nkulu Kamwana Adolphine, who was the first Kitawalas woman to die in the camp. Her grave, by the way, is now a site of yearly pilgrimage for many Kitawalas. So as we passed through the trees, Pastor Malongo remembered a story. He told me that in order to grow this forest, the Belgians gave each one of the prisoners who'd been brought in and forced to build this camp 5 mangoes. They told them to eat the mangoes and plant the seeds. And for each seed that did not produce a sapling, they were given 1 lash of the shikot. COLAGREL is today a space that is haunted by the memories of such violence and cruelty. And you can see it embodied in the prison building at the center of the camp, where disobedient prisoners were sent and confined as punishment. The walls of these tiny cells were painted black in order to maximize the feeling of darkness and isolation. And yet the descendants of many of those who were relegated to these camps continue to live there today. And in nearby Kasaji. And for them, this site embodies more than their oppression. It embodies the history of their resistance and their endurance. But it also is a space where people live in precarity. You see, according to their oral history, they were bequeathed this land at the moment of independence. And yet today, they have no legal documents recognizing their claim. Telling their story matters, not just for what it reveals about the intimate experiences of the Kitawalas men and women who are imprisoned there, but because recognition of that history matters for those who live there today.